participants and our distinguished guests for today. I'm Dr. Smita Desai. I am the founder and director at Drishti. And today we have with us two very esteemed guests. We have Dr. Avinash De Sousa, whom I think all of you have heard of and know well. Good evening, Avinash. Thank you for taking the time of today and
Good
to be
evening. Good
with
evening,
us.
ma'am. Yeah.
Dr. Avinash, apart from being an old friend, is also a practicing psychiatrist and currently the president of the Bombay Psychiatric Society. So, very warm welcome, Avinash, to our program today. Our second panelist speaker for the evening is Ms. Sadia. Sadia is a clinical psychologist and is the founder of Inner Space Therapy. Thank you, Sadia, again for taking time out, and I really look forward to this, what I'm sure is going to be a very lively conversation, both with Avinash and with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Um, Before I begin this conversation, I would just like to introduce Drishti to the participants. So I'm just going to quickly run a very, very short presentation of just about 3 slides. So Avinash, Sadia, with your permission, I will just take about 2 minutes to do this. Yeah. So just to give you all a little introduction to Drishti. Drishti has been an organization which has been functioning in the space of psychology and special education needs for about 27 years now. Sadia at one time used to be my colleague at Drishti, which I'm very proud to say, and I'm so happy to have her today as our webinar panelist. Of course, she's been with us here before also. Rishi started with center-based services with our head office in Mumbai in Andheri, and where we started with the usual, work of consultations, assessments, therapies in terms of, counseling, remedial education. Soon thereafter, we also started with, the adolescent students and providing them the national, open schooling. And all of these are our core services and exist even today. But from there, we soon moved on to school-based services. And in fact, around the time when COVID started, we were working with about 40 school systems across Mumbai and Bangalore. Bangalore, we began our center there in about 2014. So we've been doing similar work in Bangalore as we have been doing in Mumbai. And while we were working on school-based services, slowly we moved into teacher training, training workshops, etc. As the need evolved, and soon we moved on to specialized programs, which is kind of immersed in technology. We provide IEPs, that's your individualized education plans, individualized counseling plans, all which are provided through a therapy management program, which is again all technology and web based. um, and actually that's where we then moved into another need, and much before, a little before, I would say, COVID, by introducing our new initiative, which is online training platform, which is known as Prabha. And we have placed some specialized training courses there, largely, of course, in the areas of counseling, mental health, special education needs, and to be able to reach out with this, with this training, which is very experiential based, to all the different stakeholders, whether these are teachers, in service or trainee teachers, school counselors, psychologists, special educators, even parents. So there are different courses that we have put up on our Prabha website, and you're welcome to visit us there. And what we've also tried to do is provide these courses under different variants. So you might just want to have a quick peek at it, and those are known as our insight variant. You might, want to do a little more in-depth study about it. That's known as our light variant. And then, of course, we have a lot of experiential hands-on exercises that we try and take you through, right? And that is our advanced version. So, like you can see from the topics, we're working on counseling skills, crisis intervention and trauma management, inclusion, teaching diverse and inclusive classrooms, as well as applied behavior analysis. So, we also have put up a couple of toolkits just very recently, which is for parents and teachers, and also parents, because parents do come to us and constantly in need of guidance or some tips, so to say. And we thought the best way to go about this would be to put in a little toolkit which is also easier for the parents to go through, right? So that's really what we have put up on Prabhav. And as you know, you are participants on the webinars. I'm sure that this is also some extra learning that I'm sure that you would find very, very useful, right? So with this, I will, thank Dr. Avinash, thanks Sadia for allowing me to present our courses. I believe very strongly in the power of psychoeducation, and that's really where this entire initiative of courses and training, etc., has evolved, right? So, okay, let's start off with our webinar for today, and that is, where do addictions begin? And I strongly believe that anything and everything, positive and not so positive, also really begins at home with the family, and therefore we have a lot of leeway to do a lot of positive things within the home environment. Okay, so Dr. Avinash, my first question to you, yeah, what if you can kind of explain, elaborate, like what really, how really does one understand what is an addiction? How does it really begin, right? And then if you can also let us know what are your thoughts on what's the role of the family as far as this is concerned. Yeah, over to you.
Okay. Now, see, the word addiction primarily means, a very strong need, attraction towards something. And basically, addiction is when you can't do without a particular substance, a particular object, a particular device, maybe a particular habit. And the main thing is you're not able to give up the habit, come what may. And if we try to make you forcibly give up the habit, you can get aggressive, violent, go to any extent to continue doing the habit. You may lie, cheat, steal, uh, get aggressive to get hold of what you need. Uh, no matter what you try, one is that the frequency of the habit or substance or device increases, the severity of usage increases. It leads to psychological complications, and that's when we call it an addiction. And now, of course, the realm of addictions is far beyond substances like alcohol, cigarettes, or cannabis, or other drugs. It has moved on to pornography addiction, internet addiction, smartphone addiction, compulsive shopping, compulsive chatting, and then you also have video game addiction, and we also have people who have texting addiction, social media addiction. So all these kind of things which are coming up. So addiction has moved beyond the substance realm per se. We well, I firmly believe that why does a person go towards any substance or objects? The reason is he goes towards that because he's probably lacking something in his home. He's probably lacking something in his uh, environment that he's seeking outside. He's seeking some solace, he's seeking some comfort, and he's finding that either in alcohol, cannabis, or something. And he's also probably finding that in the device or the video game or something, which allows him to connect or disconnect which allows him to connect there and disconnect from his reality. And that's why one gets addicted. I believe families play an important role because of three reasons. One is many addictions are genetic, so familial factors do play a role. We've had many patients who've been alcohol dependent and they've had fathers who are alcohol dependent, and we've had people who've been into drugs and they've had a parent who's been into drugs. So there is definitely that whole familial aspect which is there. Also, I think a lack of family support, family discord, family disharmony is very often the reason why these things happen. We have many adolescents who go into internet and social media and smartphone addiction because of family discord, and their world is virtual and they don't like to be associated with the real world around them. We have many people who take to alcohol and drugs to escape from their family environments, and that is what uh, uh, I would say is the role of family in addiction.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Avinash. Thanks for setting this off. Sadia, in your experience working with maybe adults, young adults, also probably seeing adolescents, what do you think are, some of the strongest causes which kind of propel individuals into any of the different types of addictions that Avinash has just spoken about? I mean, something that our participants can get more aware of. What's something that we can put up, in our minds as red flags? What is it?
I feel that we have to look out for personality tendencies way before addiction starts. And these are addictive personality tendencies, tendencies where there is an impulse control issue, ability to work with urges is a little low. Then also, what is the family environment holding as important? If pleasure is held as important and pleasure seeking is held as important in the family, then the orientation of the entire family is towards getting more and more of a high. Now, that high can come from alcohol, it can come from work, it can come from achievement, it doesn't matter. But the point is, are we seeking pleasure as a family or are we looking at happiness as a family? I think is a very, very fundamental point which we don't really touch when we talk on addiction. Because when we are, as families, when the orientation is towards more, getting more and more and more, and the pleasure principle, so to say, is in action, then peace, silence, connection, these which are very important for our brain chemicals, which are things that settle people down and create some kind of harmony in the internal system as well as in the family system, kind of start missing, and instead pain and trauma take their place. So when there's a lot of pushing in the family, go forward, do this is not enough, comparisons, criticisms, we are not enough, other families are doing better, all of this creates a pain culture. There's a pain body in the family dynamic which we don't address, and somebody then gets up and becomes addicted. So I feel that it's very important to see that within the family culture whether this pain body is getting created. And often the trauma of the parents comes into the system and begets trauma, further trauma, and then leads to trauma of the kids, which then further leads to addiction. So I think pain is a very important part of addiction. Whether or not it is recognized as active pain, there is internal unhappiness, uneasiness, because of which, like doctor said, there's a lack, a perceived lack, because of which a person seeks a high outside. So as a family, are we all looking, I feel it's not even very okay to look at just the addicted person. It's very important to look at the whole system and see what are we standing up for, what are our value systems, are we wanting more and more and more from life, are we perpetually dissatisfied as a family, do we have some sense of contentment and satisfaction with what we have, do we appreciate what we have in our life, do we spend time with each other? So I feel there's a lot more that goes behind addiction which we don't really address.
Um, Thanks, Sadia. Very, very interesting when you've spoken about this, so to say, dichotomous, understanding of pleasure versus happiness. And I think it's also, I think, very right for you to be saying that, the highs are not just got from, uh, substances, right? It can be a very achievement driven family, which otherwise, on the face of it, seems good, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, right? But like you said, where might we be plateauing? What might be our sense of contentment? Where are we happy with what we might have achieved, right? And like you said, that pain culture, I think these are things which are not spoken about as much. We're not giving as much importance to it, but I think that's something that we kind of need to definitely be looking at. you know so Avinash, coming back to you a little bit in terms of what might be like a more no, a more neurobiological understanding of addiction, right? Like, what happens, like Sadia mentioned, there are some innate personalities. I mean, is that also so in terms of are there neurobiological systems which are more vulnerable, more prone to succumbing to addictions? And also, what happens when a person is in the process of getting addicted? If you can just give us a little bit of this neurobiological background of what happens maybe prior to addiction and during addiction. Avinash, you're on mute.
One of the neurobiological theories of addiction that has been put forward over the years is that, like Sadia mentioned, we have different personality types, and one of them has a trait which involves risk taking. One of them involves a trait which is called novelty seeking. And novelty seeking people are those who want new experiences every time, and they want to, look for those experiences either with people or events or situations or substances. uh, Similarly, the ones who take risks and don't care, and they believe that risk hai to ishq hai, that kind of thing. So they, so these are the people who are more prone to addictions. So they love to experiment with a number of things, and they love to experiment with different uh, substances, different things. And they say that we are only experimental or recreational users, but the moment they start experimentation, their brain sort of has what we call certain receptors. And I always say the receptors are like pegs in your brain, into which the substance goes and fits itself. And once it fits into those pegs, it sort of fires off various circuits in your brain that makes your brain feel, yes, this is what I have wanted, all my life, and this is what I deserve. And the moment the you stop consuming the substance, those pegs get empty, and then those pegs, that is the receptors, they start vibrating and asking for more of the substance. And that's when you develop the craving that I want to go and have my alcohol, my weed, my cigarette. If you even observe cigarette smokers, it's like within 2 or 3 hours they have this intense desire to have the next cigarette, and they get restless and irritated if they're not allowed to smoke. So because those brain receptors are irritating them. And basically, the circuits involved in addiction are similar to the reward seeking circuits of our brain. So so people who are constantly looking for gratification and reward are the ones who are more prone to addictions, unless they're getting gratification in other forms. So you may have somebody who's getting gratification in a video game, or getting gratification online, or getting gratification in a sexual mode. He may not uh, go into substance use because he's getting the gratification elsewhere. And generally, that is what explains that people who are happy and contented and leading a good life are getting those rewards, and the reward circuit is being satisfied. So their tendency to get addicted to substances is far less. But
Right.
people whose lives are distraught and people whose lives have problems are particularly where those reward circuits aren't getting satisfied. And there is a greater chance that they might take to alcohol, cigarettes, cannabis, some substance, or video game, sexuality, any other method to sort of get those rewards. And that could lead to an addiction. It's also very well known that the younger you are and the younger you start with these addictions, they last longer. So there are some people who start at the age of 13, 14, 15, 16, and they are the people
Right.
who, if you don't stop them, then they are likely to become hardcore uh, substance abusers or addicts, and it's going to be very difficult because the brain is primed at an early age, and that's a very critical period for brain development. So therefore adolescent drug addiction or adolescent addictions need to be controlled so that they don't turn into adult addictions, because then it will become very difficult to treat them. Yeah, that's all from my end.
Thanks, Avinash. So just a little thing from here. So when we're talking about there being these personality factors, probably something innate. So what does research tell us that can addictions be hereditary in nature? Is there some kind of a genetic component to it, which kind of is a risk factor?
So, well, one thing we have to understand is all addictions are what we call polygenic disorders. That is, there are multiple genes involved. So we really can't pinpoint that there's
Okay.
this one particular gene which is responsible for an addiction. But it definitely runs in families. It is something we know,
Okay.
and probably I think because dysfunctional families or family related issues are very often transgenerational. So we often see that there are generations that keep repeating the same behavior, except if you have one generation that probably is brought up in a different environment and then starts thinking differently. So therefore that genetic factors are definitely there, but at the same time it's a more familial, hereditary, environmental factor that plays an important role.
So you feel that it's the environment which really has, can have a very strong protective kind of impact on the individual in spite of there being hereditary genetic
Yes.
factors.
Oh, yes. Over here, I will just add one more thing that I always believe that parents that encourage social drinking in their adolescents
Uh-huh.
are, pushing them more towards developing drinking or substance use as a habit. Because when, as a family, you tell the adolescent that this is socially fine, you're sort of encouraging the habit. I mean, I am not saying that it's a wrong thought, but I believe that if you're too liberal at too early an age, when
Right.
the adolescent brain is not equipped with how to handle how much and when and what, and uh, the control aspect of the brain isn't there, then the chances of the adolescent brain developing an addiction is far more. But I think the approval, the fact that socially it's acceptable by my family, makes it all the more easier for them to move in that direction.
Right, right. I think there is less a competency for responsible decision making, right, at that stage, and I think that's where
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
adult approvals become so important. Right? Okay, so Sadia, taking off from where Avinash just left, and when he initially spoke about those risk takers, right? And I liked his little statement of risk hai to ishq hai, that kind of thing. I can always depend upon Avinash coming up with some statement that I'm going to remember. So, in your experience, what some of the important risk factors? And then, of course, to balance it out, on that seesaw, what might be some of the important protective factors against addiction? So, we can start with risk and get on to protective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've spoken of risk factors, early use, as he said. He also mentioned liberal parents seem to be a clear risk factor. So he has mentioned these two. We have also mentioned that family history of
Right.
addiction is a risk factor. I said pain in the family, trauma
Yes.
in the family is a risk factor.
Sure.
So these are, and like I said, children who have less interest in other things. I mean, they are like the most interested in TV, the most interested in one kind of medium. They have less varied interests, let's say, would be a risk factor also, in my opinion, because I feel the more open the system is, the more interest internally in other things, hobbies, the less likely. So that becomes a protective factor then, that you have interest in other things. And if you don't, then because then there's nothing else for pleasure, there's nothing else for recreation. Any one thing can become recreational, which is providing pleasure. And then, of course, the kind of things we get addicted to are things that provide pleasure instantly, quickly, and naturally the pleasure lasts for a short period of time, the hunger is higher, and then the addiction, of course, starts as a cycle. So these are, I think, the primary risk factors which we have already sort of been talking about. The protective factors would be having friends with whom you connect who are not necessarily involved in this addictive space, friends
Social
who are not
connections, you
addicted,
mean?
yeah, social connections who are not addicted, who are not
Right.
with you in this, a healthier family connection, academic um, academic performance also has been seen as a protective factor, because there is again reward that
Right.
comes from other things, and the academic rewards are very easy. I mean, in our society, if you do well then academically, then everybody is praising you, so the reward
Right.
is quick.
Right.
Unfortunately, being kind is not going to be rewarded like that, but
Right.
being academically qualified is going to be rewarded. So there are traits which are rewarded. What would really help is the less dominant traits also get a reward. Less dominant positive traits, less well known positive traits. For example, if a person is, let's say, great at mental calculation, or if a child is good at, uh, let's say, taking care of animals, starting to bring reward into those systems would also be very helpful. But yeah, these are some of the protective factors that I see. More connection, more interest in other things.
Right. Sadia, just like, to kind of, so that, just digging into your experience, any particular case where, there might have been any kind of addiction, whether it's a gaming addiction or whether, and I'm saying even a young adult because I know that you work a lot with adults. Any case like that where you found that any one of these protective factors could actually help this individual climb back outside of this addiction, kind of
Yeah.
reverse back or get out of it, or at least close to working out of it. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, I actually have seen many people, adults and young adults included, and very often, and that was the point I was mentioning earlier. Very often, I find that when we work with the trauma and the pain in the system,
Mm-hmm.
addiction drops off
Okay.
on its own, even without intervention sometimes. And it has happened, especially the milder addictions, the easier addictions, let's say, when
Right.
there is not too much of entrenchment in the addiction.
Right.
That's simply because the addiction was being used as a to substitute, to
Right.
medicate the pain. So when there is an ability to create more self-awareness, more joy within the system, to be able to stay with who you are, to embrace who you are, to develop compassion for who you are, to understand where your parents' trauma is coming from, why they are behaving the way they are behaving, to create stronger boundaries in the system where you can say no when you want to and still reach out. These are things that I find very very helpful in helping addictions, because a lot of addiction happens also because of risk taking appetite. But I also like to go a little below and find out, but why is this person so hell-bent on taking risks? Now it's become a habit, but why? But
Why
why
did it
is
start?
why is it why is that habit? Why is that risk giving the meaning to life
Right.
and nothing else? And when you go there, you very often again find that uh, lack of self-esteem, unhappiness with who you are, pain in the system being at the center of it. And so, and like I was saying earlier also, see, if we have to also look at one very interesting fact: when we think of addiction, we almost think of people who are not doing well in life. But addiction is extremely high in people who are doing very well in life also.
Right, right,
Okay, most of our corporate population has some or the other kind of substance that is they are hooked to, a lot of them to marijuana, weed, almost on a regular basis. And so it's not about not being good enough, it's about not being full enough, you
right,
know. And
right.
somewhere that has to be worked with, that need, that incompleteness, that is a part of the system, the dissatisfaction that's a part of the system, even though seemingly everything else is there. So that really has to be, I feel, investigated. And when we work with that, even when we don't actively work with stopping addiction of any kind,
Hmm.
addictions do reduce on their own, because then the person does realize that, hey, I'm this is not good for me, this is harming. And that self-love has developed enough to let go of a habit which is harmful.
Hmm.
So, I feel that that's at the bottom of it, and that's where the work is supposed to be in a focused way done. Of course, then there are people who don't want to do that work, and they are stuck in certain patterns and needs medication and all of that. But I feel that there's a combination of these two things that would ultimately help. So,
So I think what you're saying is self-awareness and also self-compassion, right?
self love, self compassion, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sadia. Avinash, parents do talk to us about this, and often come up with this question, and that's why I thought it would be very relevant to have your thoughts on this. If you can kind of tell us, what are some of the two or three most important red flags, yeah, for, let's say, parents to recognize that their children are possibly addicted, because there are a number of parents who tell us that I really didn't know till it got so bad. Okay, because he or she would be doing this out of the house, right? I'm talking about, of course, I'm talking more about substance abuse, but of course, nowadays there are others, like you said. So, what might be two or three flags, indicators that go up as red flags for parents, and also I would say maybe for school counselors to keep a lookout, when they are observing children in the schools or in the classrooms. What are some two or three really important indicators for each of these populations who are very significant caretakers?
Well, I think if you find suddenly that a child is having a lot of changes in mood, if you find there's a lot of anger, irritability come up without a reason, if you find there is some amount of secretiveness, there is a desire to remain alone, aloof, there's missing of school and academics, there is a tendency to hide things, stay alone in the room, stay alone in the bathroom for long times, not allow you to touch his bag, not allow you to touch his cupboard, not allow you to, touch his things, asking for money for frivolous reasons, and very often those reasons being untrue, lying a bit, wanting to go out in the evening, late at night, saying I'm going to meet a friend, come back. And this happens on a very regular basis, and when they come back you feel as though you can smell something, or probably the eyes are redder, and these kind of things. So these are uh, indications that this is probably something is happening that you're not sort of aware about. And particularly I always tell parents that you got to know who your kids friends are and what they're doing, and where is he going and who is he meeting, and you got to know whether he has friends who are into these kind of things that put him at a risk. You also have to know, you can't just totally trust him and, okay, he's going for a walk at 11 in the night. You got to know where he's going and who he's meeting and what he's doing. You also have to be aware of the fact that you have to monitor, if he asks for money, how much, why, where, what you're going to do, multiple things. And you need to sort of be a little strict in that whole area. And another thing is, I always tell parents that, a lot of parents tell me that, in our family, no one has done these things and our child will never do it. And I always say that the adolescent period is a period of experimentation. So there is
Right.
always a risk that any child can take to addiction, and we have to be very open to that idea.
Right.
In fact, I always say that we also need to talk to our children that there will be times when you're in an environment where some of your friends are probably experimenting with alcohol or smoking, and you may be offered a cigarette and told to take a puff. Please learn to refuse, because we don't know what the cigarette may contain. Also, please, do not indulge in experimental substance use. So parents have to talk to their children about these things. This is something which is, I think, very, very essential. And I think another important red flag is academic deterioration, relationship issues, parent child arguments. All these point in that direction.
What about for the school counselors, Avinash? Any one particular thing that you think they could be
Well,
seeing?
I think so for the school counselor, I think primarily what matters is that the child's attendance in school is poor. There is bunking
Okay.
of school. He's found in the bylanes of the school with other children, probably invariably, and there is a tendency to lie. Sometimes they might engage in conduct issues like forging their parents' signature in a calendar. All these kind of things happen.
Right.
Apart from that, bringing in a little bit of substance to school, like I always remember, we've had children who are caught carrying beer to a school picnic, or we've had children who've been caught with a packet of cigarettes in their bag in school. We've had a ninth and 10th standard cases where a little bit of weed is found in their bag. So these kind of incidences keep happening. And more importantly, what's also very, very essential is that uh, any child who is showing academic deterioration suddenly for no reason, and at times the behavior is such that there's a total disregard for authority, so we really don't know if he's under the influence of something that he's had in the morning or in the afternoon and coming to school. So or coming, so that is one. And the tendency to bunk, I mean, I remember, I don't know, we don't use this term nowadays, but I think Sadia and you would remember that we have all studied of a condition called truancy in child psychiatry at one time. It's not a term which is very common nowadays, because we don't have children who bunk school a lot nowadays and stay at home, because there's a lot more monitoring that happens. But this was a very common single hallmark factor for adolescent substance abuse, that they leave the house in the morning saying that they are going to school, but they don't land up in the school. They land up with their friends doing whatever they do, and then they come back at 1 o'clock as though they have attended school and come back, and parents don't know. But in
Don't know.
today's era, because of the mobile phone and because of so many things, I mean, invariably, the father's friend sees him, clicks a photo, sends the father on WhatsApp, he's caught in one day. But I remember when we were in school, I mean, when I was in school, I very vividly remember we've had students who've not turned up for 15 or 20 days to school, and no one knew. And they were
Right.
found smoking. They were found, and this is in Bandra, they were found smoking and they were found drinking, and then
Right.
they were, caught and brought to task and all those things. So these are, I think, markers that I would say.
Right, right, right. In fact, my next question, Sadia, is something that has been kind of put on chat by one of our participants, and I think it's a nice question. So thanks, Ankita, for your question, and I'm going to put it to Sadia. I would also encourage all the other participants to please put in some questions, relevant questions for our speakers in the chat box, and I would be very happy to take that up. Sadia, Ankita's question is, when someone is addicted but is in denial, how can you get them to become aware of it? And I would, my question was always also in another way, that how does an individual become aware or accept that he or she is addicted to something? So I'm going to kind of put both the questions together to you, and you know,
Yeah. I think people know more than they are willing to accept. The usual thing is there is so much attachment to the drug, to the substance. This is especially true in case of food addiction,
okay,
because food is normal, no? So it's very difficult to say that when it is an addiction and when is it
right,
hunger. But
right,
usually people know they're not eating out of hunger. People know that they are eating out of just the pleasure. That's that hit. I
Right.
need that hit. I need that high. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I have to take more food. I have to eat more food. Then they feel guilty. Then they binge. Then they puke. All kinds of stuff that follows addiction. So usually people know what is going on. It's very difficult for another person to convince, because then what starts to
Okay.
happen is when the other person puts this like a mirror, this person doesn't want to see. And so I feel what is helpful is usually saying, this is what I feel.
Okay.
You need to check this. You need to check it for yourself.
Hmm.
Because the moment, otherwise, it's a fight. The person saying, no, you're addicted. The other person saying, no, I'm not addicted. No, I can let it go anytime. This, that, and the other. And maybe providing some helpful tools while you're having that conversation and saying, in case you want to speak to somebody, here is a number.
Hmm.
Here is a case history of somebody who went through this.
Went through
Here
this.
is some stuff. So, here is some amount of information, some resources
Right.
that you could use. This is what I feel is going on with you. You have to take that call. But it's very, very difficult when it becomes a match. And particularly, I feel that because we see addiction as such a see, it's also a problem because of how we see addiction. We don't see addiction as somebody who's fallen into who's walking and has fallen into a ditch.
Hmm.
We see addiction as somebody who's really crooked and who has chosen it.
Hmm.
So the orientation of addiction is that you are the culprit. Usually, when you're telling somebody you are an addict, you're also talking in the tone that you're a culprit.
It's like a judgment, right?
It's a judgment. It's a judgment. It's a value judgment. It's a strong value judgment. And
Right.
also, it comes with a tone that you can help it, but you're not helping it.
Right. Right.
Whereas, what the addict needs is you probably got stuck with this because you're in some kind of pain,
Right.
and there's a better way to deal with that pain than harming yourself like this.
Right. Right.
Here are some resources. So this is a language I feel that leads to denial versus will lead to some openness. And I feel the language has to really, really change around confronting addiction, because as a
Yeah. I mean,
society we have seen addiction in a very negative way so far.
absolutely. Like you said, especially the family, because family members also get very troubled, right? So, sometimes it's just frustration at the end of the tether.
Yeah,
And so, like you said, I think language, and I think language will also emerge from the compassion, presence or absence of compassion, right, Sadhya?
correct.
So, um, I think, Ankita, I hope that has kind of got across to you. I think what Sadia, is putting across is that it's really important for us to be able to use the right language, to have compassion, and I think also to, use terms like I have observed, I have noticed, provide support in terms of maybe some stories that you have, the resources that perhaps the person can go to, and maybe support, nudge, prod. I think it also depends, Adya, on the age of the person,
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
extent of the addiction, right? All
yeah,
of that
yeah,
is also going to
yeah,
play.
yeah.
uh,
Absolutely. And also validating that it's coming out of some kind of personal,
right.
it's coming out of a difficulty. I think when a person is younger, it's a child, uh, compassion has to be also managed with strong boundaries, because it's not that you have to be compassionate, but you don't have to you keep the boundaries. You say you can't hang around with friends who are doing stuff. I'm sorry, that's not going to work. But at the same time, it's not you are at fault, you are wrong, you've chosen the wrong path, you are less. This communication has to be, because this is actually increasing pain, which is going to increase addiction.
Right, 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 right. Thank you. Avinash, I was wondering if you can take the other question from the chat, which is by Chindu Matthew. Where
Okay.
the question is how to deal with the addicts who think it's the way to enjoy life. So what are your thoughts on that? Maybe, a lot of youngsters start off like that, right? Thinking that, wow, this is cool, and this is fun. So, how I think that's what the question is. How do you deal with such individuals when they actually get addicted to this cool behavior?
Well, I think the whole thing is that um, initially everyone feels it's a way of life, everyone feels it's enjoyment.
Hmm.
Even I have a lot of people who tell me that cannabis is organic, so that's why we use it, and it's herbal. And I always tell them that even alcohol is herbal, nicotine is herbal, everything is plant derived, technically. So
Right.
it doesn't mean, I mean, that I said even datura is herbal, but that doesn't mean you have datura. So the thing is, it's something which is very inbuilt. And what I think what's also very important is there's a whole lot of misinformation online where people feel that cannabis in makes us think better, feel better. And I always remember I read a book long ago called Phantoms in the Mind, which was written by Dr. Vilayanur Ramachandran and Susan Blackmore, who are both neurologists. And
Phantoms in the
a
mind,
few
is it?
phantoms in the mind, and some years ago, I remember Susan Blackmore saying that she would have never been able to write that book if she wasn't taking cannabis regularly. And now I feel nothing in the book is true, after she sort of said that, because I wouldn't want to, read anything that someone has written after taking cannabis. So
Right,
the
right,
whole answer is I always tell the youngsters that, it's a myth that cannabis will make you enhance, particularly I get a lot of people from the creative fields who tell me, we're able to write better, we're able to play
right.
music better. I said, and I always tell them that it's probably because even the noise sounds like music to you, after cannabis. So the thing is, so you sort of feel, that you're doing things very well. I mean, it's not the others that feel you're doing things very well. You're the one who feels. So this is something which is there. There's a whole group of youngsters who believe that it's very normal to indulge in recreational weekend substance use. So
Right.
they may have meth, cannabis once a week on Saturday. They don't have anything Monday to Friday, but they do everything that they want on Saturday night. And I always tell them the problem is that what people don't realize is that there are studies which have shown that a single puff of cannabis, a single puff of nicotine, a single puff of, like, one smoke, just one smoke of cannabis, one smoke of nicotine, one little consumption of cocaine or methamphetamine can make you addicted for life. It's a fact. So it's not that your recreational use will remain recreational use. In due course of time, you will get onto regular substance use. So that is something which I always say. And I think another thing which adolescents also have to realize is that uh, you I mean, it's very sad that we have a lot of adolescents who say that I don't want to take medication for my depression, I don't want to take, because they feel I don't want to have chemicals entering my body, but they're very okay with recreational substance abuse, where once a week
Right,
they're putting in far more toxic chemicals into their body. So I
right.
always tell them that you have to be very clear about what you want. And I think primarily these are people who want to just break away from the current world because the realities are harsh, and they want to get into this imaginary world under the influence of a substance that I'm absolutely free now, which is what leads to them. And I think the whole thing is, let's do it, kya hoga, nothing will happen, that whole thing is that the tendency to take that risk is there. And that's why they prefer to do it, and they want to see. I mean, I've had people who tell me, I wanted to see what will happen to me after I take it. So it's not even that they want to get addicted to it, it's just that they said, I want to see how I'll behave. I
Right.
want to see how, I mean, I've had people who tell me that we actually try cannabis from different vendors on different weekends just to see which is stronger, which is better, just for our own fun. I mean, so it's not that they are even doing it for the addiction, they're doing it just for the sake of probably doing it. And I probably hope that adolescents realize that there are a lot of better ways to cope with their problems other than taking to a substance or pornography or a device. And there are far more better ways to sort of cope, which we need to inculcate in them. And that's why, I mean, I think I'll just add one more point here. What's very important is that we need to have substance abuse prevention starting in the 6th and 7th standard in school. We need to educate them. I remember when I do these programs, one of the things which I do is I take a recovered substance abuse patient with me, who goes and tells them that, I've lost 10 years of my life because of a substance, or I've lost 8 9 years of my life because of a substance, and I don't want you all to do this. And and then they it has a greater impact on the adolescent than me telling them as a doctor, not to do this. A recovered substance abuser who's now in his 40s but has lost probably 20 years of his life to a substance is far more powerful in his message, to these children. And it also
Right.
is part of the recovery process for the patient anyway, that he feels good that he's giving back. But the most important thing is, I think, that is a very important message that has to go to them. And also how to identify uh, probably drug peddlers or vendors on the road, and how not to get lured by these people, is something which in the 6 7 standard is a right age that these children have to be told about this, so that they don't. And they have all sorts of questions. I'll tell you, 7 standard students know more about substances than some of our psychologists may know. They know names and they know everything. They know the websites, they know everything. It'll be shocking to see
Right.
what
Right.
do
Right.
they sort of know. I was brought a child to me in the 6th standard because he put up some photos on the internet by making lines of talcum powder, and trying to just show that he was probably snorting cocaine. It wasn't cocaine, but
Right.
he put up some pics on the internet, which of course was, he spread it amongst his friends. And then one mother called up this mother, and the mother was very worried, and she said, and then this guy said, see, I'm not doing anything, this is just talcum powder, please don't get worried. But the fact that he thought of doing it is
Yes.
itself there. And then there are these video games which deal with narcotics, like you have narcotic gangs, and video games which deal with narcotic loots and drug, I mean, all these things. So what happens is, very often children are lured at a very early age towards this.
Right. Right. Okay. So there is another interesting question. Again, even I had thought of this question also, but I'll come back, Avinash, to you with that. But I'd actually like to go on with this. What Avinash spoke about prevention and Sadia. I mean, like we talk about parents needing to be not approving use of substances, right? Or parents doing something preventive in nature. Like, what do you think, what do you suggest are a couple of ways that you know parents can be talking to their children or communicating to them in terms of what might be outcomes, or like Avinash said, um, there need to be monitoring. But from what I know is that parents are often very scared of speaking or asking their adolescents where they're going or what they're spending their money on, or why do they need more money, right? So what do you think are some of the healthy patterns that parents can perhaps engage in for this?
Uh, I feel that the patterns don't necessarily have to do with addiction. I feel the patterns have to do with creating systems in the family where there is more awareness of what the other person is doing. For example, keeping your phones away and having dinner, or having a time where you just sit together as a family. And this is something you have to start very early. I mean, parents also have to put in that effort to want that, because a lot of times, even parents are very busy. See, they are also working, they're also tired, they don't want to listen to their kids, and they don't want to even know what their kids are doing. I mean, I understand the stress levels are genuinely high, and we are busy on social media or something. Even parents want to just be there, do their thing, talk to their people, have their own space. But in the process, I feel that communication breakdown in the family is really high, and that communication breakdown is leading to a lot of mental health issues, not just addiction. Just the fact that people don't know each other, don't see each other, don't hear each other, like even though they live in the same space, we are not. So children don't have to talk, uh, they may choose to remain silent. It's not that they have to speak or they have to say, but just having that space available on a daily basis, as to chit chatting, being silent together, doing something together. Just at this time, we will not pick up our phones, we will not remain in our rooms, We will not just do our own things. I feel is a very, very important um, system, because that's where there is an ability to sense what's going on. Even if you don't talk, you know the restlessness in your child is coming up. You know that the child is not able to sit, wants to keep going, doing this, glancing at the phone, and there is space for intervention automatically at that time. So that I would say is one. Uh, as I was saying earlier, I would always encourage parents to question themselves and see if they themselves are creating an environment of greed, achievement, pushing, demanding. Because if that is the case, then naturally, even if the child achieves well by their standards, they can go forward and get addicted. There is no doubt in my head that that happens even later. Are we creating an environment of lack, or are we creating an environment of abundance in the family? And so that environment of abundance, gratitude for what is there. I feel some of these practices have to be brought in. These are old, good sounding practices, but they have to be brought in, revisited, because they're very helpful in keeping an anchor in the family system. And that anchor is what has loosened up, because of which all of the external environment is only becoming more attractive, and the family environment is only becoming looser. There are less anchors, so we have to rebuild anchors in the family environment.
Right,
Like
right.
doctor said, in knowing the children's friends, insisting that I have to know whom you're going with. Yes, you can go, but I have to know. I want to talk to them, call them over. uh, they should be partying at our house too. It should be, it cannot just be that you're going off and meeting your friends and I don't know who they are. So please call them. Interest in your children's life, in your children's friends, I think these are very big factors.
Right, right, right. I think Sadia, I think what you've said also answers one of the, one of the questions that came in from, came in from Niti, who said when children are not comfortable in the relationships with their parents, how should we help them? I think relationship building, trust building, family bonding. I think those are things which as parents when we decide to become parents, I think that's a part of the role that that comes in you know
Yeah.
Avinash, just a couple of questions which I'm going to kind of bundle together, one both by Nandini, and that is, how can schools handle pornographic addiction among students, and then of course also vaping, e-cigarette addiction, whatever these different
Okay.
and linked segments
Yeah.
in.
So I think pornography is something we address now at a 6-7 standard level. Even in sex education, the whole paradigm of sex education has changed now,
Hmm.
because what we used to teach as sex education is something that third standards and fourth standards know. Today.
Right.
So we now first standards in fact know. So I always say that we rather we teach them about things like pornography, contraception, uh,
Sure.
sexuality at an early age. All those things are what we talk to them. So we talk
Right.
to them about pornography. We explain to them that pornographic videos are filmed. They are filmed in a particular manner, so that what you see there is not how sexuality actually happens in the real world. We also explain to them these are professionals who are trained in all these things, and they're doing these things professionally. So we explain to them all those kind of things about pornography. We also tell them that your expectations of sexuality change as you grow, and if you get addicted to pornography, you expect to have those kind of uh, things in life, which may not always happen. And we also explain to them that that's why it's different, and it's so we explain to them the whole concept. So that's when we explain to them what pornographic sites are, where they should not go, what they shouldn't do, all these things. We also talk to them about responsibly posting photos of themselves and what they wear
Right.
and multiple things, because that could also be put onto sites. So if
Right.
this kind of an education is imparted to them, it does help in a very big way. With regard to vaping and e-cigarettes, I think e-cigarettes are not very easily available now, but a lot of
Mhm.
people do use them thinking that these are free of nicotine and these are safe and whatever. But the bottom line is that they are addictive nevertheless. You have a lot of these hookah parlors and hookah bars which are there, and they have these fruit flavored hookahs, but we really don't know what they have within them. And there's a lot of vaping that also happens. So the key thing is that it's the family that has to sort of take a role and play a very important role here. That it doesn't mean that, and I always tell, I mean, this is also one of my lines, that substance abuse is not an individual game, and finally the entire family will play. It is that way. The whole thing is that one person in the family being a substance abuser, the entire family is at a risk to just crumble. So you need to then get this into the, we explain to them about vaping, e-cigarettes, nicotine, so many things. And now I will tell you uh, something which is very alarming, that uh, as an experiment, just to see how strict our laws are, uh, I was out with uh, Aditya, and we went to a particular chemist, and so I went to a chemist and told them I want the Nicotex chewing gum, which is the chewing gum which is used for, it's a nicotine chewing gum which is used to replace uh, tobacco use, and and they gave it to me without a prescription. So I mean, if nicotine chewing gums are available to anyone and everyone, I mean, people are going to use this, that way. Similarly, there are many chemists who still give a lot of drugs which may be sedatives and other things without a prescription, though we have strict rules, but it's still being done. So I think we need to have something at a policy level also, which is there
Mhm.
also has to be some rules that you can't have a panwala, or you can't have probably a cigarette shop within certain distance of a school or a college, and these
Right,
kind of things have to be
right,
there. So but nevertheless, I mean, I think also what people don't understand is that the substance use industry is very contributory to our economy. So there's no doubt on that front. So you can think of Kingfisher mineral water, but you all know what they mean, finally. And they, you can think of Bagpiper video cassettes, but you know what they mean, finally. So the thing is, you can do all those things, but things don't change. I mean,
right,
I don't think in COVID, when alcohol shops were closed, I mean, and when they reopened, people were far more sincere than they went for their vaccine or their RT-PCRs, but they made sure that they got
true,
their stock of alcohol. So
true,
I mean, the adults also set an example for the youngsters. So it's something which
absolutely,
is there. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I mean, I don't understand. I mean, it's this is there, which is there. And I always say this. I mean, we blame culture, like I don't have any qualms in admitting this. I tell all my patients that if you visit any Christian cemetery and you see so many young Christians who've died, I said the reason is alcohol. I mean, I've seen so many young Christians in my community die due to alcohol, and I always say that why? I mean, it's primarily because we've socially promoted it in a big way. That it's
right,
allowed. I
right,
mean, and I always say that no. I mean, like I had a patient who told me even Jesus drank wine. I said that doesn't mean it was in the Bible and it had different significance. It doesn't mean that you drink alcohol because he did that. So
right,
there are socio-cultural sanctions that are also there, and I always say we need to look at ourselves again. And I know a lot of Christian families where it's very normal to offer wine to their children at 14, 15, 16,
right,
18, which I think is absolutely morally wrong. And parents need to probably take a tough stand on this. I know of families in many parts of Bombay where they celebrate the child's teenager or his 16, 17 birthday by giving him beer and making him drink with
right,
the entire family, which
right,
I think
right.
again is morally wrong. I mean, but that's my personal view. I'm not
Of course.
necessarily
No, but
saying
I
that those
think
views
I think
are
it's a very
yeah.
responsible view. I mean, today you've been in this field for so long with so many experiences, and today, as the president of the Bombay Psychiatric Society, I think your views, whether personal or not, I think carry a lot of weightage, Avinash, and I
Yeah,
think
because I've had a father who's come and told me, ki I have made him taste everything but with me. I mean, what's the need to be so proud about it? I mean, I don't understand. It makes me feel emotionally that you're the one who's actually introduced him to the world of substances,
right,
and now
right.
you're
And
bringing
then,
him now
and
you're
then to
bringing
go
him
ahead
for
and say,
treatment.
we want
Yeah,
to stop.
yeah.
Okay, so now we're running. I think we are at the end of our program, and like a number of people have said, I think our participants have really enjoyed this discussion. And so I'm just going to ask our two panelists, Sadia, starting with you. Just some summary thoughts, your ending thoughts for this program for the participants to take away with, and then, of course, we'll let Avinash close it. So, Sadia, over to you. Sadia, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think we have covered a lot of ground. The only thing I want to kind of end with is if you smoke, you can say, I just smoke cigarettes, but my child does weed. But if you smoke cigarettes, your child will do weed. That's the way it works. You cannot say, I will smoke, I will drink, I will not control uh, my need for substance, but my child should stay in that limit and not go one step ahead, because children will. So there's a lot of self work as a parent, as a family, as a social system. I think it's also for all of us. There's a lot of work when we see addiction growing outside, to look inside and ask ourselves how addicted we are. And it could be to just social media. Can we keep our phones away for 10 minutes? That itself is a good start, in my opinion, to get a system which is less addicted. So I think we have to take a shared responsibility for the increase in addiction in the whole system.
Right. Thank you, Sadia. This, brings to my mind, very often when parents ask me, can you give us some good parenting tips? And I say there is only one tip, and that is be a good role model, because every action of yours is being watched, every word of yours is being heard by your child. And like Avinash said, don't expect that you're going to do one thing and your child is going to do, the socially good thing. So, Avinash, over to you for your final words on this session.
Well, just three things. One is say no to drugs, say yes to life. It's very important. Secondly, I think one of the things we neglect in our mental health paradigm is college mental health. We keep doing so much for students up to the 10th, and
Yes,
then we leave them to the wolves, when it comes to college. So I think we need to
perfect.
look at college mental health very, very
Right.
seriously. That is the second point. And the third point is there is no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such thing as a perfect child, but I think there are just perfect moments along the way, and we have to go with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sadia, Avinash, for taking this time out. You're both very, very impactful people in the field, known you on for so long. And I look forward to your presence again on some future webinars by Drishti. I would request all participants to please fill in the webinar feedback link that really, really tells us what we can do better in the future. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful Diwali to come. And all those who are going on a little vacation, have some very peaceful moments with your family and yourself. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you.